How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. If you guys are new here, that means you've never seen my 1975 Honda Gl1000. In the last video, we talked about everything that's wrong with this bike, but one thing we haven't done yet is taking it out for a proper ride. And today there's finally some decent weather, and we can actually do that. Now, if you did miss the last video with this motorcycle, it is not 100% tuned correctly, and it needs a lot of adjusting, so we can't take it too far, but we can still get a feel for what this bike rides like and what the hype is all about with these GLs. Now, I have rode this GL just a little bit, 2 or 3 miles down the road, nothing crazy, so I'm excited to put another 3-4 miles on it and confirm my first impressions of this bike. Now, I want to talk about my first impressions with this bike before I go for a ride. My initial impression of this motorcycle is it was extremely well balanced when I took it out for a ride. It felt really good to handle. Now, here I have my CB750. The CB750 is an amazing machine. It is incredibly smooth, but one thing that I want to say plagues the CB750 is the fact that it has a 4-cylinder motor that sits at the front of the bike. So it is very, very front heavy, and when you go to turn or lean, you definitely feel the weight of the motor there. Now, that doesn't make it handle bad or poor or something that I dread about the bike, but it's something that becomes super apparent when you ride other motorcycles, especially when you ride a bike like this GL right here. Now, because the GL is a flat motor, it's incredibly well balanced. It is very similar in a very weird way to riding my BMW R90 Racer. Of course, the seating position on that bike is extremely different. Everything's different pretty much, but one thing that is the same is the way that the motor lays and the balance you get from the motor laying in such a way. Now, this has 2 extra cylinders, carburetors, it weighs a ton more, and it's water cooled, but you have the motor sitting all the way down at the bottom, and it gives an incredible sense of balance. Not only that, but this is not the gas tank, and the gas tank for this motorcycle actually sits underneath the seat. Gas tank's right here and sits under the seat there, and once again, it gives another thing that's closer to the ground and has a lower center of gravity as a motorcycle. And that's something you immediately notice when you ride the GL and you take a corner. Now, it's not a sports bike, it is a touring bike, but it handles really, really good for being a touring bike. I'm not saying that it's gonna carve canyons or anything like that. I'm just saying it is impressive how balanced the machine is and how, as a rider, it increases your confidence level when you are on it. And that was my initial impression of the motorcycle. Now, because the bike's carbs aren't balanced perfectly, I am not really able to get a true sense of the power this machine has, but we're gonna try opening it up a little bit more today, and with that being said, let's give it a cold start up and take it for a ride. Now, this motorcycle does have a kickstart, but we're not gonna take the kickstart that lives in the tank here out. We're just gonna simply come here, pull the choke, ignition, and it should pop right into life. Like I said, the carbs have gone through, but let's put some heat into it and get it out on the roads. You guys hear it strip there a little bit? You guys probably heard it crunch the gear a little bit. That's because the RPMs are so high. When you put it in first, it doesn't like to be put into gear at that RPM. But it actually does want to pull decently. I mean, 25. Not bad. Accidentally went into neutral there. So the GL performed pretty much exactly how I remembered it to perform. The one thing was, before I never really got to experience the power of the machine, and this time I got to play a little bit more around with the throttle. I got to use it a little bit more and actually get a little bit of feel for how the flat motor likes to accelerate and the power band. Now the bike is wanting to idle a little higher, as you guys can hear. sitting at nearly 2100 RPM. But, I mean, it's running pretty good. It just needs to be tuned a little bit. Now, because the carburetor is so out of sync, I know I've said it a million times in this video, I don't really get a true understanding of the balance of the throttle. And you can see here, I mean, I was leaning in for this corner and I clutched in to brake because the bike was pulling so hard because of the throttle and the idle just being completely off. So one thing I guess I noticed is the throttle's still sticking, and because of the throttle sticking, it makes the bike very unpredictable. Something that's gonna need to be changed as soon as possible is that throttle for sure. But just taking these corners here, I mean, the bike just feels so planted, just hands off. I mean, it's just predictable as to where the bike is going to go. It's a very, very simple bike to ride, even though it is a little intimidating because of the size. It is a really big bike. Not only is it 1,000, but it's a big 1,000 cruiser that takes up a lot of room. The bike didn't overheat, stayed cool the entire time. I think it's still gonna creep up to about here, but it stayed in the good zone. And otherwise than carburation and a little bit of the linkages and possibly fluid in the brakes and whatnot, it rides really good, except you guys probably heard a chattering noise like that. That's this license plate frame hitting the back of the fender, which this light should be up here. And also, if you come here, you can see how low the bike is in the rear because of these air struts or shocks or whatever they are. These aren't original, and the bike's supposed to sit a little bit higher, I believe, because it is squatted in the rear ever so slightly. Actually a pretty decent amount. So that probably doesn't help with me sitting on top of it too. Of course, I didn't rip it up super high because I want to do maintenance before I really get on it, but it has a lot more power than I thought it did initially. The first couple times I drove it, it felt super down on power, and this time it didn't really feel like that. I knew the bike was going to be fast because it is 1,000, a nice cruiser. I mean, people say, you know, they went 80, 85 on the highway with no problem with these things, so I always was waiting to feel the power of the bike, but every time I would kind of give it, the throttle would stick because it's stupid, and I just never really got a feeling of how much power the bike actually makes on a butt dyno, I guess you could say. Overall impressions, I mean, it's a nice bike and I can't wait to have it fully dialed. I just wanted to take it out for a quick ride, kind of give you guys a little bit what it feels like to drive it and my thoughts on it. With all of that being said, if you guys did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and as always, catch another video.